Hey, my name is Ethan. I'm 28, and I spend most of my days with a drill in one hand and level in the other. I work for a small crew that does residential renovations around Portland. Nothing glamorous. I hang cabinets, level bookshelves, patch drywall, haul heavy dressers up narrow staircases, and listen to clients argue for 20 minutes about whether the paint swatch on the wall is warm beige or sand beige. It pays the bills, it keeps my hands busy, and it gives me enough quiet hours inside other people's houses to think too much. My closest friend is Mara Bennett. She's 29, sharp as a fresh blade, and works as an event coordinator for a small but ambitious company that puts on corporate parties and private dinners. She can walk into an empty room with 3 lamps, 1 rug, and a bad attitude and somehow make it feel like home. We've been like this for almost 6 years. People who don't know us always assume we're together. We always correct them the same way. No, I say, smiling. Just friends. Mara usually rolls her eyes and adds, if I were dating Ethan, I would have reorganized his entire closet by now. That used to feel safe, comfortable, like a well-worn hoodie you never have to think about. Then Mara found a new apartment. It was a small third-floor unit in an old building near the river. White walls, big windows, scratched but beautiful hardwood floors. The kind of place that needed love but had good bones. The day after she signed the lease, she called me. Ethan, she said, no hello. I need you to come furniture shopping with me. I laughed. Why? You have taste? I have a truck. Exactly, she answered. And you know when a table is about to collapse just by looking at it. I pretended to be offended. I thought you called because you missed me. There was a short pause. Then her voice softened, just a little. I do, but the truck helps. Sunday morning I picked her up in my old pickup. We drove to a big secondhand furniture warehouse on the edge of town. Mara moved through the aisles like she was conducting an orchestra. She chose carefully. A tall floor lamp with a moss-green shade, a solid oak coffee table with honest scratches, 2 mismatched dining chairs, a small cabinet with brass pulls that were slightly tarnished, and a tall bookshelf she declared had soul. I mostly followed behind, pushing the cart and trying not to grunt when we lifted things. When she pointed at a bright yellow armchair, I frowned. That chair's wobbly. She turned, instantly defensive. You only hate it because it's yellow. I hate it because the legs sound like they're confessing to a crime every time someone sits down. She laughed, loud and sudden, and for a second the whole warehouse felt warmer. At the checkout counter, the owner, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, looked at the two of us and smiled. Your wife has excellent taste, she said to me. I didn't think. I just answered the way I would have answered any stranger who made an easy assumption. Yeah, I said, grinning. My wife always wins the arguments about furniture. The woman chuckled. I chuckled too. But Mara went very still. Her face flushed deep red, not the light embarrassed kind. Real color. She looked down at the receipt like it was suddenly fascinating, then turned her head away from me. When the owner walked off to get change, Mara spoke so quietly I almost missed it. I wish that wasn't a joke. I froze with my hand still on the cart handle. We loaded everything into the truck in near silence. On the drive back to her new place, she stared out the passenger window for a long time. I tried to keep it light. Hey, I said, glancing over. My wife's been awfully quiet today. She didn't look at me. Her voice was low and tight. Don't call me that if you're only joking. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. The air inside the cab changed in an instant. Mara, I know, she cut in. I know you were just joking. She said it like someone trying to convince herself it was true. When we reached her building, we carried everything up 3 flights of stairs. The rest of the afternoon we spent putting the apartment together. I drilled. She handed me screws and corrected my angles with the precision of someone who had spent 6 years making sure every detail at an event was perfect. When I finished hanging the bookshelf, she stood back, arms crossed, and announced it was crooked. It's not crooked, I said. Ethan, I organize events for extremely particular rich people. I know when something is crooked. I checked it with a level. The bubble was off-center. She gave me that small, satisfied smirk she gets when she's right. Don't say it, I warned. She shrugged. I didn't say anything. Your face is holding a press conference. That made her laugh again, and for a little while the strange tension from the store faded into the background of hammers and laughter and the smell of new wood. By evening, the apartment had shape. The moss green lamp glowed in the corner. The oak coffee table sat in the middle of the room. The bookshelf stood straight against the wall. A new rug softened the floor. It looked like her. Warm, a little messy, full of personality, and prettier than she ever gave herself credit for. We sat on the floor eating pizza straight from the box because the chairs were still dusty. Mara looked around slowly, then said, very quietly, "Thank you." I tried to keep it casual. "For the truck?" She kept looking at the room. Her voice dropped even lower. "For being here." The words were small, but they landed heavy. I remembered the way she'd whispered in the store. I wanted to ask what she really meant by, "I wish that wasn't a joke." I wanted to ask if she felt the same shift I was starting to feel, the one that made my chest tight every time she smiled at something I said. But before I could open my mouth, my phone buzzed. My crew chief was texting about an early start tomorrow. The moment slipped away. I drove home that night with the windows down, the city lights blurring past, and a strange, heavy feeling in my stomach. Like I had just walked past an open door without realizing it was there. And now, for the first time in 6 years, I wasn't sure if I would ever get another chance to step through it. The next 3 days were quiet in a way that felt wrong. Mara had always been the kind of person who filled my phone with random things. A photo of a weird plant she saw on her way to work. A meme about ugly apartments. A message at 2 in the morning asking if I thought her new curtains should be cream or gray. Sometimes she would just text to scold me for owning only one blanket, like that was a crime against humanity. But after the furniture trip, her replies shrank to almost nothing. I sent her a message on Monday afternoon. Did the moss green lamp survive the night? 4 hours later, she answered, still alive. Tuesday, I tried again. Has the bookshelf crushed you yet? Just no would have been fine, she wrote back. One word, no period, no emoji, nothing that sounded like her. I stared at my phone for a long time after that, sitting in my truck during lunch break with grease still on my fingers. I kept replaying the moment at the checkout counter. The way her face had flushed when I said, "my wife." The way she whispered, "I wish that wasn't a joke." And then, on the drive home, the cold edge in her voice when she told me not to call her that if I was only joking. I had meant it as a harmless comment to a stranger, but maybe to her it hadn't felt harmless at all. Maybe it had touched something she had been quietly carrying for a long time, and I had brushed it off like it was nothing. By Friday night, the guilt had settled into something heavier. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had hurt her without even realizing it. So I did the only thing I knew how to do when words felt too risky. I showed up with food. Mara loved the creamy mushroom pasta from a tiny Italian place near the market. I bought 2 portions, added garlic bread, and grabbed a bottle of the peach iced tea she always drank when she was tired. I told myself I wasn't going there to confess anything dramatic. I just wanted to hand her the food, apologize for making her feel like a joke, and maybe, if I could find the courage, tell her that calling her my wife had felt strangely easy. Too easy. Like something my brain had already accepted without asking permission. I stood outside her apartment door with the paper bag in my hands and knocked twice. She opened the door wearing a loose beige sweater and her hair in a messy bun. Her eyes widened a little when she saw me. "Ethan?" I lifted the bag like a peace offering. "Brought pasta, your favorite." Before she could answer, a man's voice came from inside the living room. "Mara, who is it?" I looked past her shoulder. A guy was standing up from the couch. Mid-30s, clean white button-down, expensive watch catching the light from the new lamp we had hung together. He looked like the kind of man who had never carried a bookshelf up 3 flights of stairs in his life. Mara hesitated for half a second, then turned back to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "This is Julian Pierce," she said, her voice a little too bright. "My new boyfriend." The bag in my hand suddenly felt much heavier. "New boyfriend?" I repeated, because my brain needed the extra second to catch up. She avoided my eyes. "Yeah, we reconnected recently." Julian walked over, smiling the smooth, polite smile of someone who was used to being liked immediately. He looked me up and down in one quick sweep. My work shirt still had sawdust on it. My hands had small cuts from earlier that week. My boots were scuffed. I was holding a cheap paper bag of takeout. He extended his hand anyway. Ethan, right? Mara's mentioned you helped her set up the place. I shook it. His grip was firm but brief. Yeah, I said, that's me. Julian glanced at the bag. You brought dinner. That's thoughtful. But I was actually about to take Mara out tonight. Mara looked at me like she wanted to say something, then didn't. I set the bag on the small table by the door, keeping my voice even. No problem, it'll keep until tomorrow. I should have left right then. But Julian looked around the apartment and said something that made me stop. This place is cute, he said, but Mara really deserves somewhere better than this. Mara's eyebrows pulled together slightly. Julian softened his tone, turning to her. I just mean you deserve a safer, nicer neighborhood. I know someone in real estate who has a townhouse in West Hills. Great price, good terms. If you're open to it, I could help with the paperwork. I turned to face him directly. She just moved in here. Julian smiled at me like I was a child who didn't understand how the world worked. I know. Sometimes people settle for temporary places because they don't realize they can have better. The words sounded caring on the surface. But I saw the way Mara's eyes flicked around the room we had spent the whole afternoon building together. The lamp she chose, the bookshelf I had fought to hang straight, the rug she had picked because the colors felt right. Julian was making all of it sound small. I kept my voice calm. What's the contract situation on that place? Whose name would it be under? What's the interest rate? Is the deposit refundable if something falls through? Julian's smile tightened just a fraction. You in real estate too? No, I said. I fix houses. I know enough to be careful when someone drops great price through a friend into a conversation. Mara's voice cut in, sharp. Ethan, you don't have to talk like that. I looked at her. I'm just trying to make sure you're careful. Or, she said, and her eyes were suddenly colder than I had ever seen them. You just don't like that I have a new boyfriend. The words hit harder than I expected. I swallowed. Mara, that's not... Julian placed a hand on her shoulder, gentle but possessive. It's okay, he said to her, loud enough for me to hear. Some friends have a hard time when things change. I stared at his hand on her shoulder. She didn't move it away. I took one step back. I just came to drop off the food. Mara glanced at the bag, then at me. Thank you. 2 words, polite, distant, like I was a delivery guy. I turned and walked out. The door closed behind me with a soft click. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. Julian's voice drifted through the door, low but clear. See? He acts like he has the right to decide for you. I didn't wait to hear her answer. I walked down the stairs, got into my truck, and sat there with the engine off for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. For 6 years, I had been the person she called when she needed help moving furniture or when she couldn't sleep. Now there was someone else in her apartment, someone polished and confident who was already trying to convince her that the home we had just built together wasn't good enough. And the worst part was, I had no right to feel this way. I had spent years calling her my friend. I had spent years laughing off every assumption that we were more. I had made the joke about her being my wife and then immediately walked it back like it meant nothing. Now she had someone who wasn't walking anything back. I started the truck and drove away, but the image of Julian's hand on her shoulder stayed with me the whole way home. I tried to stay out of it for 2 days. Mara was a grown woman. She could date whoever she wanted. She could make her own mistakes. She didn't need me hovering like some overprotective older brother. That's what I kept telling myself every time I picked up my phone and almost texted her. But the image of Julian standing in her living room, casually suggesting she deserved better than the apartment we had just finished together, wouldn't leave me alone. I had been in enough houses and talked to enough real estate agents over the years to know that great price through a friend and I can help with the paperwork often came with hidden strings, especially when it was aimed at someone who had just moved into a new place and was still figuring out what stability looked like. Saturday morning, I called Owen, an old buddy who sold building materials and knew half the real estate crowd in Portland. He picked up on the second ring. Owen, I said, skipping small talk, you ever heard of a guy named Julian Pierce? There was a short pause. Then Owen let out a low whistle. Ethan, tell me you're not thinking about doing business with that asshole. My stomach dropped. Why? What do you know? Owen spent the next 10 minutes telling me exactly why I had a bad feeling. Julian had been running variations of the same scam for a couple of years under different company names, the latest being something called JP Urban Homes. He targeted women who were new to the city, recently divorced, or just starting over. He would show up charming, mention insider deals on townhouses or condos, offer to fast-track the paperwork through a trusted financing company, and ask for a sizable deposit to hold the unit. A lot of the properties weren't even his to sell. Some were already under contract with other agents. Some didn't exist at all except in old listing photos he pulled from the internet. The consulting fee was never refunded. One woman had lost almost $18,000 before she realized what happened. The case was still sitting in small claims court because Julian's contracts were deliberately vague, written to look like investment connection fees rather than standard real estate deposits. I asked Owen if he had proof. He sent me photos of old business cards, screenshots of warning posts in local real estate groups, and a PDF of the complaint from the woman who got burned. I stared at my phone for a long time after we hung up. If I took this to Mara right now, she would probably think I was making it up out of jealousy. I needed something more solid. Something she couldn't dismiss as me being bitter that she had a new boyfriend. Sunday afternoon, I drove out to the West Hills address Julian had mentioned. The neighborhood was exactly what he had described. Clean streets, young trees, rows of new townhouses. The unit he talked about had a big for sale sign from one of the largest legitimate brokerages in the city. No mention anywhere of special internal financing or Julian Pierce. I called the number on the sign and pretended I was interested. The agent who answered, a woman named Patricia, told me the property already had 2 scheduled viewings that weekend and had never been part of any private financing program. When I casually dropped Julian's name, she went quiet for a second. Then she asked, "He's circling again?" We met at a coffee shop near the development 20 minutes later. Patricia showed me an email from another client Julian had approached last year. Same pitch, same fake urgency, same request for a large, good faith deposit that disappeared into a shell company. She hadn't been able to press charges successfully because the paperwork was too slippery, but she had been quietly warning other agents ever since. I asked her one direct question. If I have a friend who's being targeted right now, would you be willing to confirm it to her face? Patricia looked at me for a long moment. Has she given him money yet? Not that I know of. Then you need to move fast. That night I texted Mara. I need to talk to you about Julian. It's important. She didn't answer for almost an hour. When she finally did, her message was short and cold. Ethan, I don't want to hear you badmouth him. I typed back, I have proof. She didn't reply after that. I drove to her apartment anyway. It was a little after 9. The living room lights were on. I knocked and waited. Julian opened the door. The friendly smile he had worn the first time I met him vanished the second he saw my face. Ethan, he said, voice flat. Not really a good time. I looked past him. Mara was sitting at the small dining table with a stack of papers in front of her. On the top page, I could see the logo of a company I didn't recognize, Pierce Home Access Consulting. My pulse kicked up. I stepped forward anyway. Mara. She looked up, clearly annoyed. Ethan, you can't just keep showing up like this. I didn't look at Julian. I kept my eyes on her. Did you sign anything yet? Julian's voice turned icy. You need to leave. I ignored him. Mara, have you transferred any money? She stood up, voice tight. That's none of your business. I know, I said. But if you haven't, you need to stop right now. Julian laughed once, short and sharp. He's jealous, Mara. He can't stand that you're moving forward with someone who can actually help you build a better life. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo of Julian's old business card. I held it up so both of them could see. JP Urban Homes, I said. Sound familiar? Julian's expression shifted just slightly. I swiped to the next image, the complaint file. Rebecca Lane, $18,000. The house wasn't even his to sell. Julian's voice came out fast and smooth. That was a civil matter that's already been resolved. I hit play on the recording I had made of my conversation with Patricia. Her voice filled the small apartment, clear and calm, confirming that the West Hills townhouse had never been connected to any special financing program run by Julian Pierce, and that she had seen him use the same playbook on multiple single women new to the city. Mara went pale. Julian turned to her immediately, hands raised like he was calming a spooked horse. Mara, listen to me. Real estate has layers of paperwork. He's taking a few pieces of information completely out of context. I placed the printed documents on the table. Then call Patricia, right now. Use the number on the actual for sale sign, not the one he gave you. The room went very still. Mara looked at Julian, then at the papers, then back at him. Do it. Julian didn't move. That was all the answer she needed. She took one step back from the table. Her voice was quiet but shaking. Julian? He exhaled through his nose, the polished mask finally cracking. He looked at her, then at me, and the contempt slipped out before he could catch it. You're really going to believe some handyman over the guy who's actually trying to get you out of this dump? Mara stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. What did you just call him? She asked very slowly. Julian realized his mistake too late. Mara, I didn't mean… Yes, she said, cutting him off. You did. She picked up the contract, tore it straight down the middle, and let the pieces fall onto the floor between them. Then she pointed at the door. Get out of my house. Julian looked at her for a long second, jaw tight, then turned to me with pure hatred in his eyes. You think you won? He muttered. I met his stare. No, I think she didn't lose. Mara opened the door and held it. Julian grabbed his jacket and walked out without another word. The door closed behind him with a final, heavy sound. The apartment was suddenly too quiet. Mara stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the torn paper on the floor. The moss green lamp we had bought together was still glowing in the corner. I felt exhausted. She turned to me. Her eyes were red. You were right, she said. I shook my head. I wish I wasn't. After Julian left, Mara didn't cry right away. She bent down and started picking up the torn pieces of the contract. I took a step forward to help, but she looked up and said quietly, Don't. I stopped. She gathered every scrap, walked to the trash can, and dropped them in. Then she leaned both hands on the edge of the dining table and let out a long, shaky breath. I almost gave him money, she said. I stayed where I was. But you didn't. She let out a small, bitter laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I almost did, because he looked me in the face and told me I deserved better than this place. I glanced around the apartment. The moss green lamp, the oak coffee table, the bookshelf I had spent an hour making sure was perfectly straight. Every single thing in here had been chosen by her, touched by both of us. None of it felt temporary or second-rate to me. He wasn't selling you a house, I said. He was selling you the idea that your life right now isn't good enough yet. Mara kept her eyes on the table. Her voice dropped lower. And I bought it so fast. I answered without thinking. Because he hit the exact spot where you're already hurting. She lifted her head and looked straight at me. Do you know where I'm hurting, Ethan? I didn't answer. I couldn't. She pushed off the table and took a few slow steps closer. I hurt because that day at the furniture store, when you called me your wife, I felt happy. Stupidly, ridiculously happy. And then you turned around and made it into a joke again, like it was the funniest thing in the world. I stood there feeling like an idiot for even letting myself hope for half a second. Her eyes were shining now, but she kept going. Then Julian showed up. He said all the right things at exactly the right time. He made me feel chosen, clear, not confusing, not like someone you call wife and then immediately laugh about. I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight. Mara, she shook her head. No, let me finish. I stayed silent. She looked around the room again at everything we had built together in one afternoon. Julian wasn't the first person to make me feel small about this place. I did that to myself the second you walked it back like it meant nothing. I told myself I was stupid for reading into it. And then someone else came along and told me I was right to want more. So I almost believed him. I took a breath and finally spoke. I'm sorry. She met my eyes. For what? For using a joke to touch something real and then getting scared when you reacted like it mattered. Mara didn't move. I kept talking because if I stopped now, I might never say it. That day at the store, I didn't say, my wife, because it was funny. I said it because it felt easy. Too easy. And that scared the hell out of me, so I laughed it off. I told myself we were just friends, like we've been telling everyone for 6 years, but the truth is, I've been lying to myself longer than that. She took another small step forward. I don't want to be the guy you only call when you need help hanging something or when you can't sleep. I don't want to be the spare key holder. I don't want to stand on the outside of your life pretending that's enough. My voice dropped lower. I want to be the person you call when this apartment breaks and when nothing is broken at all. I want to eat cold pasta on the floor with you and argue about lamp colors and carry bookshelves up 3 flights of stairs and still get yelled at when I hang them crooked. I want to be able to call you my wife one day without having to say it was just a joke afterward. Mara's eyes were full now. One tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. You're really slow, Ethan, she whispered. I nodded. I know. She let out a shaky breath that was almost a laugh. Slow enough that I almost bought a house from a scam artist. That's a special kind of slow, I admitted. I'm embarrassed for both of us. A small, wet smile appeared on her face. She stepped closer until there was almost no space left between us. Then she rested her forehead against my chest, right over my heart. I still hate that you were right about him, she murmured. I lifted my arms slowly and wrapped them around her. Not tight, just enough to hold her there. I hate that I was right too. We stood like that for a long minute. The only sound in the apartment was the quiet hum of the new lamp and the distant traffic outside. After a while, she spoke into my shirt. Is the pasta still good? I smiled against her hair. Probably cold by now. I'm hungry. I can heat it up. She pulled back just enough to look at me, eyes still a little red but clearer now. And you're not fixing anything else tonight. I glanced toward the window where one of the curtains was slightly crooked from when we hung them last week. Unfortunately, I already noticed the curtain rod is off by half an inch. Ethan. I raised both hands in surrender. Okay, no fixing, I swear. She let out a real laugh this time, small but genuine, and leaned back into my chest. For the first time since that day at the furniture store, the air between us didn't feel like it was full of things we were both too scared to say out loud. We still had a long way to go. She was still hurt. I was still the idiot who had taken 6 years to figure out what he wanted. But standing there in her half-finished apartment, holding her while the pasta got cold on the counter, I finally felt like we were on the same side of the door instead of standing on opposite sides of it. And that was enough for tonight. Mara filed a report the next morning. Patricia sent over everything she had, Owen added what he knew from the real estate community, and 2 other women who had been targeted by Julian came forward after hearing what happened. He didn't vanish overnight, but the net around him started tightening. For the first time, his usual escape routes were being watched. Mara didn't cry much after that. She just got very quiet for a while. Not because she missed him. Because when someone lies to you that smoothly, it makes you question every choice you've made. She kept saying she felt stupid for almost falling for it. I kept telling her she wasn't stupid. She was just tired and lonely, and he knew exactly which buttons to push. She didn't believe me at first, so I stayed. Not with big speeches or dramatic gestures, just quietly present. I replaced the lock on her front door with something stronger. I installed a simple doorbell camera. I went through her lease line by line to make sure everything was solid. On the nights she didn't feel like cooking, I brought pasta and sat on the floor with her while she picked at it. When she was too ashamed to talk to anyone else, I sat there in silence until she was ready. One evening, about 10 days later, she looked at me from across the coffee table and asked, "Do you think I'm stupid?" I answered without hesitation, "No." She narrowed her eyes. "You answered too fast." "Because it's an easy question." "Why?" I leaned back against the couch. "Because I spent 6 years pretending I didn't feel anything more than friendship for you. If we're talking about stupid, I don't get to judge anyone." She stared at me for a second, then grabbed the nearest pillow and threw it at my face. That was the first good sign. We never had an official, "we're dating now" conversation. It just started happening naturally. I stayed for dinner more often. She started keeping one of my hoodies in her closet without asking. I got my own mug in her kitchen that said, "World's Okayest Handyman," in sarcastic lettering she bought as a joke. She changed my name in her phone from Ethan Fix Stuff to Ethan Do Not Hang Curtains Without Asking. I saw the new name one night and complained. "That's too long." She shrugged. "It's legally binding." A month later, we went back to the same secondhand furniture store. Mara needed 2 more dining chairs. On the drive there, I told her, "I promise I won't say anything stupid this time." She glanced over. "I'm recording this for evidence." The same woman was working the counter. When she saw us walk in together, she smiled wide. "Well, look who's back. The green lamp couple." Mara turned to me immediately, one eyebrow raised, waiting to see what I would do. My heart beat a little harder. Last time I had used the word wife like a shield. This time I didn't want to hide behind anything. I looked at the owner and said calmly, "Not yet." Mara went very still beside me. I reached over and took her hand. "But I'm working on earning the right to say it without making her mad." The woman laughed, warm and loud. Mara's cheeks turned pink, but she didn't look away this time. She squeezed my hand under the bright store lights. On the way home, we picked 2 solid wooden chairs, one with a small scratch and one with a loose leg. I carried them up the stairs while Mara held the door. Back in the apartment, I got my tools out and started fixing the wobbly leg while she sat on the floor next to me, eating cookies and supervising like a very strict site manager. I tightened the last screw and tested the chair. "This one's solid now." Mara watched me with that small, knowing smile she gets when she's about to say something that will make me roll my eyes. "You always say that," she said. "You think everything broken can be fixed." I looked up at her. "Not everything, but the things worth keeping, yeah, those are worth trying for." She didn't answer right away. She just set the cookie down, stood up, and walked over. Then she leaned down and kissed me. It was soft and slow, tasting like chocolate chips and the quiet kind of certainty that had taken us way too long to reach. When she pulled back, she stayed close, forehead resting against mine. "Until you get a ring," she whispered. I smiled. "Noted. Technical specifications received." She laughed, the sound filling the small apartment like warm light. I looked around at the space we had built together. The slightly crooked bookshelf, the moss green lamp, the 2 mismatched chairs, the rug we had argued about for 20 minutes. Julian had once called this place not good enough. But standing here with Mara's hand still in mine and the evening light coming through the windows, I knew the truth. This wasn't a temporary apartment. It was the place where we had almost lost each other and then finally told the truth. It was the place where a badly timed joke, a scam artist, and 6 years of pretending had all collided and somehow turned into something real. Some love stories start with fireworks and perfect timing. Ours started with me calling her my wife as a joke, her blushing like she had been waiting to hear it, and me being too slow to understand what my own heart had already decided. But we got here anyway, and that was more than enough.